want to tell you a tale on the show today, a story that goes back 2 years, and a story that I believe perfectly sums up what's wrong with our political discourse and what's wrong with one-party rule in the state of Washington. A story that I hope inspires you to reject politics and politicians who use labels to vilify you, who use labels to divide us. When I started this show 2 years ago, I hadn't really advocated for policy publicly prior to that, and that makes sense, right? I was in mainstream news. It wasn't my job to advocate for or against policy. And so really the very first time I did that was 2 months into this show, back in December of 2021. And it's because a bill came up that I thought was so egregious, so bad, that I had to use my platform to advocate against it. And if you've been a fan of unDivided for a long time, you will recall this fight very well. The bill, which had been pre-filed ahead of the 2022 legislative session, was House Bill 1692. It was introduced by Representative Tara Simmons, and House Bill 1692's only mission was to reduce the punishment for drive-by shooters who killed someone. The bill's stated purpose was to promote racial equity in the criminal legal system by eliminating drive-by shooting as a basis for elevating murder in the first degree to aggravated murder in the first degree. In layman's terms, what that means is that just the act of committing a drive-by shooting and killing someone did not mean that that would be an aggravated murder. Under Washington state law, there are a list of aggravating factors where a homicide is considered so sick, so horrible, that the person who perpetrated it had such a disregard for human life that they would spend the rest of their lives in prison for aggravated murder with no possibility of early release. Now, the reason drive-by shooting is on that list, in my mind, is because if you're committing a drive-by shooting, you're spraying bullets into a neighborhood with maybe a target in mind, driving in a car 30 miles an hour, that you have no regard for who those bullets could hit. Innocent or your intended target, maybe a fellow gang member. And at the time that this bill was pre-filed and that I came out in opposition to it, and many of you emailed your lawmakers to express your opposition to it, I tried to tell the story of what the consequences of this bill would be from any angle I could. I talked about cases I'd covered personally when I was a crime and justice reporter, about innocent people who'd been killed in drive-by shootings, about a 1-year-old girl who took a bullet to the head in the South End, a bullet that was meant for her dad, about a office worker in Burien who was shot and killed by a bullet from the gun of a drive-by shooter that went through the wall at her office. I talked about how misguided it was, given the rising crime crisis, to be proposing a bill like that seemed to prioritize the worst of the worst criminals. I not only talked about it on this show, about why this was such bad policy, but I reached out to other outlets to see if they would also be willing to platform my arguments against it. The Seattle Times, back in December of 2021, published an op-ed from me where I told the story of a 19-year-old man named Corey Pittman, who was home from college on break in a car full of friends on Tacoma's hilltop when 19 bullets tore through their car and killed him. The bullets were fired by a man named Kamonte Carter, who had mistook this car for a rival gang member. And of course, he was wrong. Shot 19 rounds through it. Car full of innocent college kids. Ended Corey Pittman's life at the age of 19. Someone who'd written in his high school yearbook that his goal in life was to help his community. He wanted to be a lawyer. Life ended just like that. On this show in December 2021, again, in efforts to push back against a misguided policy, a misguided prioritization of dangerous criminals, we had on Corey Pittman's brother, Damien, who read for us the statement that he read to a judge back in 1997 when his brother's killer was sentenced.
When my brother was killed, I didn't just lose a brother. When my brother was killed, I lost a brother, my best friend, and a role model. It was just a phone call for some advice, asking to send me clothes, or just call and say I loved him. I knew that whatever hardships life brought on, as long as my brother was there, everything would work out fine. But now, that's been taken away from me. I sometimes feel I can't go on. So much was taken from me in one night. I still have dreams that my brother's alive. And when I wake up, I realize it was all a dream. I just feel like crying until I can't cry anymore. Sometimes I feel myself not wanting to be around people who have a brother to turn to because it hurts me deeply. Just realizing I used to have what they have, and I never will. Had that satisfaction of saying me and my brother again, unless I'm speaking the past tense. Words can't express the way I felt for my brother, nor can words express the deep feelings of hurt that I have been forced to carry with for the rest of my life.
Our coverage of this issue was factual. It was emotional. My opposition to that House bill was specifically rooted in policy and outcomes. It was focused on what this would mean for victims. It was focused on why this was a backward approach to the criminal justice system. We focused on all aspects of that bill. There's one thing that I did not do in December of 2021. Even though this bill was so bad, was so dangerous, even though the bill had such a disregard for people like Corey Pittman and his family that have lived with that loss for 20 years, there is one thing I did not do. I did not make it personal. I did not, in opposing that bill, attack the sponsor of that bill, Tara Simmons, which I easily could have done, which many other talking heads in my position have done, which many people on the right have done. Because Representative Tara Simmons used to be incarcerated herself before turning her life around and becoming a state lawmaker. In fact, what we believe to be the first formerly incarcerated person to represent the people of Washington at the People's House. Not only did I not make it personal, I have defended Representative Tara Simmons when people have attacked her for her background. I have praised Representative Tara Simmons for what she has done with her life, even if I do not agree with her policy. I have never and did not make this personal. You can read the coverage of it for yourself. You can watch the coverage of it for yourself. I focused on the facts, which is why I was so deeply disappointed to see 2 years later what Representative Tara Simmons posted on her Facebook page yesterday. It was a post that was meant just for friends, but one of her friends was apparently so taken aback by it that they sent it to us. Tara Simmons wrote, "It's crazy how my life has changed. When getting ready for a vacation before, my worries were confined to identifiable luggage tags. Now I have to worry about hurricane film on my windows and ensuring my security system is tight for the house sitters. As I get ready to introduce a significant sentencing reform bill this week that I hope will help people receive a second look, I remember how prior to our last Christmas vacation, I dropped a bill to help my friend Kamonte Carter. Tucker Carlson and Brandi Kruse had fun stirring up the white nationalists and insurrectionists. So much so that my kids were called the N-word and my assistants were receiving death threats on my life in their personal social media accounts. I wasn't scared from Mexico, but as my time to go home approached, I was pretty spooked. This world has gone mad, but fortunately, I know my higher power is protecting me, and if I die, then I went out proud, and the impact I've made for so many people. And if you didn't know, Kamonte came home and is an incredibly valuable member of our community. So 2 years later, after we were successful in making sure that that bill was dead on arrival, by the time we were done talking about that bill and the failed policy and how it forgot victims, even other Democrats in Olympia said they would not consider it, that it would not get a hearing. 2 years later, how does Representative Tara Simmons, as she prepares to apparently introduce another sentencing reform bill, how does she characterize our coverage of that issue? Our coverage of that issue that was never personal, that defended her against personal attacks. She characterizes the pushback that misguided bill received as being my efforts to spin up white supremacists and insurrectionists. Is Damian Pittman, Corey Pittman's black brother, is he a white supremacist, Representative? Because he was pretty spun up. He was pretty upset. Is he an insurrectionist? Or is he a Washingtonian who still lives locally, who is still upset by the loss of his brother, who didn't want to see his brother's killer walk out of prison early when his 19-year-old brother never got to have a life? Is he a white supremacist? Is he an insurrectionist? Representative, what about your Democratic colleagues that said that your bill went too far 2 years ago? Are they white supremacists? Are they insurrectionists? And this is a common tactic that I have seen used a lot on the left, which is something they do, something they say, some sort of policy they propose gets reasonable pushback and criticism. And they claim immediately that they're being attacked, that they're getting death threats, that they think their lives are in danger, as a way to try to quell that criticism, as a way to try to get to ignore that criticism and feel bad for them. Now, if Representative Tara Simmons truly had staff members who were receiving death threats on their personal social media, and if her kids were truly being called the N-word, I mean, that's horrible. But that doesn't change, nor would it have changed anything I said on this show, anything I wrote in the Seattle Times, because I never make things personal, unlike you. I stuck it to policy disagreements, unlike you. And I would ask you, Representative Tara Simmons, if you think that, quote, the world has gone mad, and that people like me disagreeing with your policy puts your life at risk, puts your kids' life at risk, puts your staff lives at risk, what impact do you think it has when you take to your social media and you call me a white supremacist and an insurrectionist? Do you think that that helps to make this mad world of ours a little more sane? No, you're doing exactly what you're wrongly accusing me of doing. You're using labels to vilify. You're using labels to distract from your own policy shortcomings. And you're making things personal when I never did. And when I defended you. And when I defended your background. And when I said how proud I was that someone with your background could turn their lives around and do what you're doing now, even if I don't agree with your policy. And this tactic of vilifying, of labeling, of name calling, we see it replicated everywhere in Washington state by Democrats. We see it happening right now by the Washington State Democratic Party and by progressive groups against Washingtonians who are out signing initiatives so they can vote on some policies that are impacting their lives. And if they dare to sign those initiatives, they're MAGA, they're right wing. They hate poor people. They hate the environment. Because what? They want to keep a little more of their own money. They want their communities to be safe. But it's easier to vilify them and to label them and to fearmonger than it is to listen to them about how your policies are impacting their lives. You know, it might have changed since the last time I spoke to him, but Damian Pittman reached out to Representative Tara Simmons after she proposed that bill. Do you think he heard back? No, not before the legislative session, at least. So you want to put things forth, you want to, vilify Washingtonians who don't agree with you, but you don't want to listen to them. You don't want to listen to how it impacts their lives. Clearly, you didn't want to listen to my detailed, factual pushback against this bill. You just wanted to make it about, white supremacists and insurrectionists, which is funny because if you listen to this show and know my disdain for Donald Trump, I don't think we have an awful lot of insurrectionists who listen to this show, Representative. And as a state, until our elected leaders move on from what has become an increasing pattern of the labeling, of the vilification, and of the name calling of their citizens, of the people they're supposed to represent, for what? The crime of disagreeing with them? This political environment cannot improve. It will not change. And unfortunately, I think the only way to get them to change their behavior and to get them to stop utilizing tactics like this that vilify you is to make sure that they lose their jobs. And I hate to say it, Representative Tara Simmons, because again, I have been so impressed by what you've done with your life. I have family members who have criminal histories. I don't think any less of them today because of it. But when you behave like this, when you vilify entire swaths of your constituency for the crime of disagreeing with you, maybe Olympia is not the place for you.